All right, in this episode, we're gonna go ahead and weld the roll cage in the car, and as you can probably see, a little bit more. All right, so we got started by tacking in the main hoop here, and you'll actually see here in a couple seconds that we actually had to undo that. So what we found to work best was actually to build 4 points of contact, because if you tack the main hoop and then the down bars going into the trunk area don't reach the boxes there, you're kind of SOL. There's not a whole lot of movement you have. So what we ended up doing is tacking the main hoop with the down bars and then positioning that so that they fit the most evenly on the 4 boxes. The 2 here were under the main hoop and then the 2 in the rear. And then once we did that, it was super easy to get going with the front bars and the door bars and everything else, because everything else was a direct fit once you get that main hoop in the right spot. So that's really where you need to spend most of your time. At least that was the case for me in this car with this roll cage from TrackSpec.
All right, let's do a sit rep. So Dad and I got the roll cage fully tack welded in. It was a little bit of a rough start there at the beginning, trying to get the everything set for this back part. That was definitely the most tedious, and we actually ended up doing a slightly different version, or doing it in a slightly different order than recommended by TrackSpec. If I understood the instructions correctly, which is very possible I didn't, it recommended that you weld the main hoop or tack the main hoop in first, and then you tack the down bars here to the boxes next, and then start to work through the X brace. And we found that that was really hard to line up. So what we did is the TrackSpec is really good about drawing little circles where the tubes connect to the various bars. So what we did is we took the down bar here and tack welded it to the spot where the little white circle was on both ends, and then we moved this main hoop around to make it until it fit right between here, hit those corners, all that kind of stuff, and then we tack welded in the cross braces, so that one and that one. We kind of tacked that hole together, and then we moved the main hoop, basically moved those 4 points around until they fit perfectly on these 2 boxes and then those 2 rear boxes. We didn't end up having to move that rear box this way just a tiny bit, less than 1/8 of an inch. But essentially that allowed us to get everything squared up in the car and put in tight against everything else. When we were trying to do it the previous way, it just was super messy. But I just want to say this kit is so awesome. It's so easy to get installed in the car. I mean, if we look right here, I mean, look how tight that fitment is. That's straight from them. The CNC notching is spot on, and any changes you need to make are going to be super easy. So next steps for the car, I should say next steps for this part of the project, I'm actually going to take a pause just in the video. This video will continue, but I'm going to take a pause for now and move to some other stuff, because the next step is obviously fully welding the cage into the car, and I don't want to do that right now because there's some stuff that I want to get put into the car, specifically the dry sump oil tank cage that's going to go back there, the seat mounts that I just got from Watson today, the fuel cell in the back. I just want to get some of that stuff done before I fully weld in the cage, because once we do that, we can't come backwards. That puts us on a path that we can't undo. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of those other pieces of fabrication, and then I'm going to pick this video back up and we'll start on welding the cage fully into the car. All right, so I'll catch you in a little bit.
Obviously, I'm no master fabricator, but I was just so impressed with how easy this roll cage was to weld in with this welder. I've had a decent amount of practice by now, but still obviously no expert. But I just found as long as I would practice the weld before I did it, basically run the torch along the surface I needed to weld like I was welding, to get a feel for where I needed to start and where I was planning to stop for each individual weld. I was getting really good welds, and it didn't really matter if I needed to weld upside down along a horizontal surface, down or up or whatever. It worked really well once I got that practice on how to move the puddle around. That's all it really took. This steel is super easy to weld. This roll cage with no big gaps between bars was super easy to weld. So I was just really happy with how this came out. Considering my welding experience, this came out really great, I thought.
All right, so as evident in the time lapse, I've started welding the roll cage. I'm pretty happy with how things are coming out so far. It's been a little bit of a trial and error to get the settings dialed in, but now that I'm getting everything dialed in, I'm pretty happy with it. All things considered, since this is the first time I'm welding the roll cage, and there's definitely a lot of learning about how to work with the torch angle and the torch speed, and kind of like where to go, where to match up. Like, do you try to weld half the tube, and just only do kind of like 2 welds, so you weld one half this way and one half the other way? Do you have to do it in parts? Kind of what does that look like? So obviously everybody's different. Different welders will have different styles with different skills, but with me it's been quite the learning process. But overall, I'm really happy with how it's coming out. Definitely glad I waited until I have welded a lot of other stuff before jumping in and tackling the roll cage, because it's definitely, in some ways it's easier because it's it's thicker than a lot of the stuff I've been welding. So heat control is less touchy and less difficult, but of course the angles you're working in make it a lot harder. So definitely been an interesting process. So I have a little bit more on the top, and then mostly just down into the back of the car. So we've actually made a ton, or I should say I made a ton of progress. I don't think I'll be welding for nearly as long tonight. I'm going to start with the top here, and then I'm going to start working my way back. I got to weld the rear boxes in place. And then I have to remove the supports here, the bracing, so that I can remove the crossbars, so I can weld around here. So I was smart enough to weld underneath here when I put this in, but I did not weld underneath this one. So I in order to get the right clearance and stuff, I need to move some stuff around. I think it's specifically I need to remove this one so I can weld all the way around and then put this in. So I'm just going to go through and start to move stuff around and continue. I think the first thing I'll do though is I'll tackle those boxes, get those fully welded in place, and then kind of start to remove stuff and work my way backwards. So we're going to go ahead and jump on that next.
So unfortunately, I lost the footage from welding the rear half of the cage, so we're just going to have to jump in here to welding all the various gussets. So right now I'm working on the taco gussets for these down bars. These were really fun to weld because they were easy. Compared to a lot of the stuff I'd been welding on the roll cage so far, these were a lot more straight lines, and they're pretty satisfying to weld. I will say though that this door bar gusset that I'm getting started on now was actually one of the more hard things to weld, because A, it didn't sit perfectly flush, so you had to clamp it, and B, this was like 18 inches long on the top and the bottom, and that was a lot to weld. So I did my best to weld the whole thing in one go, and I couldn't make it. It was just too much heat, and my hand would start to slip off, and I would rather start and stop than get a bad weld or a sloppy weld where I kind of fell off the area that I was trying to weld. So that was a little bit more trial and error than I expected, but it ended up coming out pretty good. These gussets I'm now working on for these B pillars were quite hard because they didn't perfectly line up. So what I found I actually had to do was weld to the roll cage first, and then bend them to tack onto the chassis. So that, because you kind of had to twist them a little bit to get them to work. So they were a little bit of work to get welded on, but I thought they came out great. The only thing I would recommend if you're doing this on your own car, the metal behind the what you're welding on the B pillar itself is not the same thickness across the whole area you need to weld. So there will be parts, I think it was along the bottom, it's reinforced, so you have a lot more metal to work with there, but as you start to get higher, layers of metal fall away and you're welding thinner material, so it's easy to blow through. And then lastly, I'm just getting here on the gussets that go attached to the A pillars here. These are important to get right from a visual perspective because they can be seen through the windshield. So I really made sure to take my time, get them in the right spot, and do really nice 1-inch stitch welds across the whole thing. I was really happy with how they came out. All right, so we have a couple more things to do to this roll cage before it's ready to go and ready to be prepped for paint, and mainly around safety stuff. So I have these little brackets here that I'm going to weld onto the main hoop right over there, where the the harnesses are going to go onto the main hoop. This will just keep it so that they can't slide around. You know, you wrap through it, and that way the harness can't slide sideways on the bar. And then we'll move on to the net. So I'm going to have a net that goes across the center here, and then one that goes across the, you know, the doorway area to keep that driver's seat in the case of a, you know, in one spot in case of the crash. And that's going to involve welding a couple brackets onto the roll cage as well. So I'm going to start with these guys. I'm going to go weld these onto the main hoop, and then we'll move on to the window nets. All right, it's been a couple days, and as you can see, my FAA compliant safety nets have come in. I've already gone ahead and mocked everything up. Honestly, just forgot to turn on the camera for that part. But essentially, I have a bracket here in the front bar here that will go into, so it can't slide around. It doesn't allow that to move. And then for the back of these nets, I'm following the requirements for FIA, IMSA, SRO, et cetera, where the nets have to wrap around the seat. So a lot of club level stuff and amateur level stuff, it's not required that these nets, the center net and then the left hand side net, wrap around the seat. They just need to go to behind it. But I wanted to follow the guidelines of IMSA, additional security and structure to it, or safety, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and follow those. In order to do this correctly, I'm welding, and by correctly I mean just get the belts in the right place and get the straps in the right place, because you need the bottom net to be 20 degrees down, you need the top net to be 20 degrees up, and then this one needs to be relatively flat. That's pretty hard to do with this cage structure utilizing just the main hoop. So what I've gone ahead and done is taken chain links, from like a normal size chain. I believe this is a 3/16 size chain link, and cut them in half, and then I've tack welded them for now, but I've welded these to the chassis. Thanks, Steve, for this idea. This is super easy way to go about it. It allows me to put the chain links in the right configuration so that the belts, the strap isn't twisted and weird and stuff. So I'm really happy with how this ended up. The seat's in the right place. The nets are in the right place for the seat, or will be. Both have latches for a quick release so you can get out of the car. The seat is definitely not going to go anywhere. Even if the seat mounts fail, the seat will be held in by both the safety nets and the harness, which is nice. If you're wondering about window net, my plan is actually to leave it as is for now, because I want to use a Lexan window door on the door. And if I can't figure out a solution for that, I'll get an OMP harness, which does not use welded mounts to the cage. It just uses these brackets that you bolt to the cage, which makes it easy to remove and modify and stuff like that. So hopefully I don't have to go with a window net. I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer to get a door that has a window in it, a full carbon fiber race door type of setup, but we'll see where I end up. But either way, I have this all mocked up. It's compliant. I'm good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything back out. I'm going to take the seat out, take the nets out, everything. And then I'm going to finish weld all these brackets so that they're ready to rock and roll. And then I think we'll be done. I think that's everything. The boxes have all been welded. The roll cage has fully been welded. All the various brackets for safety and stuff have been welded. So I think that's the last thing. So I'll pick you up after I finish weld the brackets. All right, now that we're back in present day, I think this is going to do it for this video. So we covered a lot, basically from bare car to fully caged car to all the various things I had to do to, you know, fully weld it in. Hopefully it was helpful. I know I didn't show every tiny little piece, lost some footage here and there, and just honestly, it was like probably, you know, 100 hours worth of work, if I'm honest. So it was a lot of work, but I'm happy to answer any comments or try to fill in any gaps if you guys have any. Otherwise, hopefully I catch you in the next one where we finally get to start reassembly. So I'm pretty excited. All right, peace.